All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining this session. My name is David Carmona. I work in Visual Studio, house of VS Online, .NET, TypeScript, and the rest of friends of the gang. And in this session, we're going to put all of that together to explore all the alternatives that you guys have to target cross devices, right? And by cross devices, I mean exactly this. And you probably saw this slide before today. So in this session, we're going to get VS in the center, and then we're going to play with the frameworks to target Windows, iOS, and Android. And the important thing, in no specific order, right? That's the tricky part of this session. So let's get started. So what is exactly what we are all looking for when we are developing an application across multiple devices? This is like the holy grail of targeting multiple devices, right? I'm pretty sure that you feel identified with this. So we are both looking for a great experience for our end users, right? So we want our end users to be happy. That's our end goal, right? So we want an amazing experience, fast and fluid, fully integrated with the device, beautiful, high performance, but at the same time, we want to be happy as developers too, right? Don't you want to be happy? Yeah? And usually, the two things don't come together, right? That's the big problem of cross-device development. So we want to be productive, we want to use our skills, we want to use the language, the tools that we are used to use, right? And at the same time, building those amazing applications. So the funny thing of this chart is that if you end in the wrong place, you are miserable, right? And this is like, actually it's like drinking from the wrong grail, right? So you die, and you die in a lot of pain. I see people nodding like, oh boy. If you don't die, at least you wish to be dead, right? It's like a very painful experience to be in the wrong part of this chart, right? So what is the first question? What is the big question that I get asked all the time about this whole dilemma, right, of developing for cross-device applications? Should I go web? Should I go native? That is the first question that everybody is asking now. And I don't know, oh, by the way, in any case, if I need to explain, web defined as working in a browser or based on a browser, right? So using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then native as working out of browser and natively integrated with the device, right? That's my definition of the two. So the difficult part in here is you probably are expecting me to tell you what to do. And I'm not going to do that, right? So sorry, guys. I'm not going to meet the expectation of this. But our goal in Microsoft is really not to make the decision for you. Our goal is to make sure that whatever the decision you make, you can use Visual Studio to accomplish whatever the goal you have, right? So in this session, I'm not going to say that you should go one place or another. But at least what I think we can do is just to discuss the attributes of the two, right? So you can, there's no, harm to say that native applications usually are those that are more integrated with the device, right? So you will get most of the device capabilities. You can create usually high-performance applications by creating native applications, right? And you have all the flexibility to take and leverage every capability of the device. The backside of this, you have to create one application per device, right? So you are like in the top left side of the chart before. Your end user is happy, you are miserable, right? Now, we'll see in the rest of the session how we can balance this a little bit, right? So this is not true. The second thing is when you talk about web applications, so the cool thing is that, perfect, so the entire promise of writing once, running everywhere, right? So now I don't need to create one application per device. I just need to write once, and then I can reuse in all devices. Sounds great, right? At the same time, if you are using a web application that is server-based, the distribution is much easier, right? You just need to upgrade or to update your server, and then all the clients or the devices are updated, right? The wrong side of this is that usually these applications, they don't behave and they don't look like native, right? So you won't have the full power of the device. You won't be able to call every last of the APIs of the device, right? And I say usually, because, again, we have blur lines in this. And with the new concept of hybrid applications, you have these web applications that are getting closer to native applications, and we'll see those later. So let's get started. The rest of this talk is really about two big sections, right? So let's talk about web applications across devices, and then we will talk about native applications across devices. So web applications across devices. The concept here, super simple, right, is all about creating applications that are generating the CSS, HTML, JavaScript, and then you consume that from any browser and then on any device, right? Sounds easy. Now, the tricky part in here is you also have some customization that you can do on those applications. So even if you are creating one code base, you can still customize per device. And you have 4 options for doing that. One, which is the easiest one, do nothing. So you basically create your application for a desktop browser, and then you wish it works, right? Just, let's see. It's a good option. The second one is, so I'm going to create just one application, but the application is going to be able to adapt itself to the device on the client. Right? So the code that I create will be the same for any device, but then the code will be smart and it will adapt depending on the device that I'm using. Right? The third one is, I'm not going to do that. So I will stay in the server and I will create a different version of my pages. So every device will use a different one. Right? It's kind of in the middle. So I can customize much more per device. And the last one is like going crazy. It's like, I really want apps. I really want my user to think that this is an app, right? And there are some techniques that you can use in there so the app behaves like a real device app. Right? So let's start with the first one, do nothing. This is my favorite demo for today. It's going to be short. You'll see that it is not going to work. So let me show you something. This is the app that we're going to use today for all the demos. I'm sure that you have an app like this in your closet. It's like this idea you have, and then it's a failed project because you never finish it, right? It's like you get up one day and say, I'm going to be rich. Nobody thought about this before. So you start developing, and then you never finish. So at least I can say that I'm going to use it for a demo, right? So that is the goal for this app now. So this app is just an ebook reader, so you can navigate through the books. You can click on the book. You can click on the chapters, and you can read it, right? The idea that I have for getting rich is that the books are actually open. So anybody can add a chapter to a book, and then the community will rate the chapter, and the chapter with the highest rating will be part of the book, right? So it's like a book that is alive, right? It is very smart to tell my idea to be rich in front of 500 developers, right? So let's see, if I don't do anything, let's see how this app looks like, right? So I'm going to use, so I have here an iPhone and an iPad emulator, so I'm going to browse this same website with Chrome and iPhone, for example. So Chrome looking good, iPhone looking horrible, right? So I wish, but it didn't happen. So by definition, usually, if you don't think about mobile devices, it's not going to look great, right? So I can't even see the books in iPhone. So let's see the first way to solve this, right? So we said that one potential way of solving this is to create HTML and CSS that can adapt in the client, right? So the great pro of this is that it is elegant, right? So I create only one app. I don't duplicate any code. Easier to maintain, looks great, right? The con of this approach is that you don't actually usually adapt per device. You adapt per resolution. So it's not like you are going to go very deep on the integration with the device, like matching the look and feel of the device, usually. The other thing is that when you are creating a website, you don't want small factors to get the entire page. Because, for example, in a newspaper, right? So you have the whole newspaper with all the news for the desktop version, but then for the small factor, you just want some news. If you use that approach, you will send everything, and then you will show only some news, right? So you are not doing the best usage of the bandwidth for that device. So how do I implement this? The easiest way is to use CSS media queries. Right? You just go to CSS and define styles that are dependent on certain attributes of CSS. For example, in this case, resolution for the device, for the target device. Right? So depending on the resolution of the device, depending on the resolution of the browser, sorry, the page will implement different styles. The other way that, by the way, the other thing that you may want to do is to override the viewport of the device so it fits the size of your web page. So you don't have this weird effect when you are looking at a desktop website that is just like a small part or is not clearly centered into the mobile device, right? The other way that you have to implement this strategy is to use things like Bootstrap. And the trick behind things like Bootstrap is that it allows you to define this layout in a way that you can do it in a declarative way, right? So instead of just going and using directly the CSS media queries, you just go to your HTML page and you use classes that are predefined and that they are doing that, you know, nice layout. So let's see this in practice. I'm going to open this website again. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to open the CSS that I have. Let's go directly to the CSS. All right. And I'm going to replace the CSS with another one that I have here, which is basically the same, but I have some media queries in here, right? So you see that in this case, for example, let me use the zoom here so you can see better. In this case, if I have a minimum width of the browser of 768, I will use those styles, right? So the final view of this, let me again run this. Let's use, I'm going to close this. Okay. So now, no changes in IE, but if I see my iPhone version, and I will probably need to refresh this, I can see that the layout has changed, right? So I was able to, depending on the resolution, using different styles for that website. Easy. So just to make this funny, let's implement so you can see it a special case, a new case. And for that, I'm going to use my favorite feature in VS 2013. You probably saw it today in the keynote, browser link. So what I'm going to do is this. Let's go to the reader. So the reader looks kind of OK in the mobile device. But if I go here, it's like the lines are too long, right? So it's difficult to read. So what I want with a reader like this is to use 2 columns. Now, the problem is that if I use 2 columns for all the devices, it's going to look awful in my mobile device, right? Because you don't want 2 columns in there. So let's do that in a way that only applies to big resolutions. So again, I will use browser link. So let me just put this here. Browser link, you saw it today working in IE. You can use it in any browser, like, for example, this one, right? So I can go in here, inspect. I'm going to look for this element. And then in here, let me make this bigger. Let me go to definition of this style. This is the style. Oops, it's OK. This is the style. So I'm going to make this style to apply only to bigger resolutions, right? So I have in here the media query. There you go. And now I'm going to put in here 2 columns. My second favorite thing in VS for creating websites is the CSS editor, right? And then if you add Web Essentials, even better. So you can write things like column count, and then it adds all the attributes for all the different browsers. I can say here 2. And then you see that while I typed, this is updated in real time, right? So now you saw that. So 2 columns in here, 1 column in here. I can make it a little bit better. Let me move back here. Just the column gap. There you go. A little bit bigger. There you go. So I have now, let me minimize this. So I have now 2 columns for IE, 1 column for the mobile device. The trick, of course, is that if I change the size of this, you see 2 columns, 1 column, 2 columns, 1 column, right? That's the trick. Now, if I use Bootstrap, Now, instead of using CSS media queries, I can directly use styles, right? And Bootstrap defines like a virtual grid of 12 columns. So what I do is to adapt my website to those columns. So for example, in this case, let's imagine that I want this chapter and these buttons in here to be side by side, right? But I only want that when it's in a browser, when on a big browser. So what I can do is using, let me again use browser linking here. So what I can do with Bootstrap is, now I have this class row. Now inside that row, I can add different elements. For example, class column. And now for the column, I can decide, let me zoom this. I can decide, hey, is this column a column for large devices, medium devices, or small devices? In this case, I want this column to stop being a column for small devices. So I say small, and then the width of the column for that 12-column grid that I have is going to be 9. Right? Same thing for this other column, class equal column small, in this case 2. I update this whole thing. And now you can see that in the iPhone, I have 2 columns, sorry, 2 rows. In my big browser, I have 1 big row, right? So without using CSS media queries, I was able to adapt my layout depending on the resolution of the target device. So the next thing that we said is, let's go a little bit crazier. So now I'm going to adapt in the server. So I'm going to get the user agent of the device that is doing the request to my service, right? And depending on that, I'm going to send a different page. So the pros of that, maximum flexibility. So now I can really use any UI customized for the device, right? Because I'm going to use a completely different UI depending on the device that I'm using. The con of this approach is that if you target too many devices and you want a customized experience for a lot of different devices, you will end duplicating a lot of code, right? Because at the end, you are just duplicating the view, duplicating the HTML, depending on the device that you have. So the good news is that with ASP.NET, you have all the infrastructure ready to do that. So you just need to copy paste a view. So you are reusing your logic in the controller. You just need to rename that view and add .mobile, and ASP.NET will take care of the rest, right? So if the request is coming from a mobile device, it will send the .mobile view. If it's coming from a desktop browser, it will send the usual regular page view to the client, right? You may want to go deeper in that customization. You can add code like that, where you can customize the view for specific devices, depending on the user agent that you are receiving with a code like that, right? And then finally, once you have that customized view for that specific device, now you can really go crazy on the things that you can do, right? And for example, you can mimic the appearance of a mobile application. And you have some frameworks that you can use for that, like jQuery Mobile, you have Dojo, you have Sencha Touch, that you can use to really mimic the UI and the behavior of a native application in that device. So in our case, let's use, for example, jQuery Mobile. So what I'm going to do, let me go back in here. Let's open this. So I have everything in the screen. Now, let me just duplicate my index, my main page, right? I'm going to come in here, index, Control-C, Control-V. There you go. I have it in here. Let me rename this .mobile. Now I will edit. And just to make sure that it's working, I'm going to write in here refreshing. Come on. Oh, I'm in the wrong page. There you go. So let me go back in here too. So I have my mobile version for my iPhone, and I have without the mobile version in the browser, in the desktop browser. So far, so good. So now that I have these two different versions of the page, now let's use jQuery Mobile to really customize the appearance of this website. So I can come in here. Let's just remove, so this is a complex page with a lot of elements. In this case, since it's a mobile device, I want to keep it simple. So I'm going to remove everything, and I'm going to show just, so for example, I have it in here. I'm going to show just the title and the picture for every movie, right, for every book. So now let me refresh this. This will look horrible, right? So it's not using any layout. So now I'm going to add jQuery Mobile to that specific version for the mobile device. So I have already here jQuery Mobile included. So the way that you create or that you show a control with jQuery Mobile is by using the custom attributes that you have in jQuery Mobile. So for example, you can go to a list and say, this is going to be a list view. So just by doing that, you saw that the whole thing in the iPhone just changed, right? So now it's a list view. It kind of has that feeling of a mobile application, right? A real native mobile application, while I'm not messing with my desktop version, right? And I have multiple, so if you want to go to jQuery Mobile, there's like major things that you can do in here, right? So you can add like custom filtering. So now you can go in here, filter the elements. You have things like themes. Data theme equal black, right? So again, two versions. I'm duplicating code because the view is duplicated twice, but I have full flexibility to what I want to show. But still, do you think a user will think that this is an app? So the first thing is that he will be using the browser, right? So that's a minor detail that he will notice immediately that this is not an app, right? So how do we go the next step? Let's mimic an app, right? So things to do in here. So the first thing that you notice when you're using an app is that it's not really taking or getting every page in every request, right? So you just download the app, and then instead of just asking for the pages, is calling services, right? Getting the data and updating the UI depending on that data consumed by services. That's usually the behavior of an app, right? So for that, you have single page applications. You can actually do that on a browser. So you can create all your logic or your client logic, instead of being created in the server with ASP.NET, now in ASP.NET, you create the services. And you have HTML pages that are calling those services and that are updating the UI in the HTML side, all in the client side, depending on the services that it's consuming, right? That is the equivalent to an app. The other thing, and by the way, this thing, if you start to do that, this thing will escalate very quickly. So two things that you shouldn't forget if you don't want to be in the wrong side of that chart is use TypeScript, right? So it will allow you to scale to complex applications. And the second thing is, please use a framework that allows you to separate the logic from the presentation. And there are a lot of frameworks for that. So for example, you can use Knockout, you can use Angular, you can use, with the announcement that we made yesterday, Win.js for that, and you have the controls to make it look and feel like a Windows application, right? So the important point in here is that by doing that, now you have a single page application that is calling services. The next natural step for you with that app is really to package the app in a real native application, and you can do that. So you have things like Cordova. So the Cordova platform will allow you to take a web application and compile, and when I say compile, it's really adding a wrapper in that web application, so it is a native application, but it is instantiating a browser, and your HTML pages are embedded into that browser. That's the trick for Cordova, right? So once you do that, now you can publish the app in a store. The user will download it. It may be able to work offline, and then you can call services from that by using TypeScript, single page application, and you can change the UI by using Knockout, Angular, or Win.js. Right? So let's look at this at a demo. So the first thing, let me show you how a single-page version of this app would look like. Let me start this again. This is going to start to be fun. Because now I can go in here, spa. So no differences. Can't feel anything yet. I click on the books, see the books, same thing, the 2 columns, blah, blah. The interesting part, if you see this, so when I navigate, it's not going to a new page. So you see that it's just adding like a hash, right? So this is really not going to the server. And we can prove that. So I can use the F2F tools. And let me click in a book, for example, here. So you can see that the request that was made when I click on the book was a JSON request. So it's not getting a new page. It's getting the JSON data from the server, and then it's updating the HTML in the client. So this starts to look and behave like an app, right? Let's look at the implementation here. So as I said before, if you still want your mind to be healthy, use things like TypeScript, Knockout, and Angular, so you can have some elegance and some structure in this code, right? In this case, for example, I'm using TypeScript. And let me open the SPA folder here. I'm using TypeScript to encapsulate the logic of calling the service, right? The logic of navigating in the app, and then the entities that I have in my app. In this case, book and the book collection, chapter, and so on, right? That's the trick. And as you know, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, right? And it compiles to JavaScript. So it is fully compatible with existing JavaScript, and it will work on any browser, of course, because the result is plain JavaScript, right? So no problem at all. So once I do that, how do I connect this with my UI, right? So this is where I'm using Knockout. So let me show you, for example, this page index. In this case, what I have in here is I have an entity called book, right? In that entity called book, I'm just binding a property of that class that is title with an element, an attribute of that div element, which is text. Looks familiar? This looks a lot like what we are used to do in SAML, right? So you have an entity, and then you data bind that with your UI. You have multiple different approaches to this. This is the one that Knockout is using. In the case of Angular, it is using MVC, but then it's your choice to use whatever you want to use. But the important thing is to separate your logic from the client, from the view, right? Once you have that, let's do, for example, so once you have that infrastructure, let's see how easy it is to create a new page in here. So I have in here a blank page, index 2. So in here, what I'm going to do is just call the service, getting the list of books, and just presenting those books in HTML. So updating my HTML to show those books. So this would be like the seed of then a bigger app, right? So let's start by getting the books. So I'm going to create here my script. I will use, first, let me instantiate the service, right? The proxy to this service in the backend. So var service equal new, books alive dot. You can see that I have full IntelliSense in case you miss it, right? Now I can create my books equal service dot get all books. Again, IntelliSense to the rescue. And once I do that, I just need to tell Knockout that he has to data bind everything, right? It's the equivalent to data bind in the server in ASP.NET. So I can do Knockout dot apply bindings. That's it. So now the only thing that I need is the HTML, so I can bind this to something, right? So I'm going to put in here a list. And in this list, I'm going to say, so this UL, the inner part of this UL is going to be repeated for every book in that collection. So data bind equal for each books. And then once I have that, I can say the LI, what I'm going to do is for every book, I'm going to bind the title of that book to the text of this LI. So LI data bind equal text is title. So let's see if this works. Let me go to the new version. SPA, index 2. Ooh, books is undefined. What's that? You think so? Book collection. So if I go here, my view model, book collection. No, I don't think so. Books is capital case. What's that? Crowd coding. What is that? Ah. You mean text? Ah, there you go. No, sorry. No, it's this stupid thing. So apply bindings has a parameter that I have to tell the model that I'm binding, right? It doesn't know what is binding, so I have to do this. Let me see now. SPA. Ah, still books. Okay. I'm gonna get that one later. So once you have that, you have now your app doing that request just for the services, right? So now you have nothing calling the service except, nothing calling the server except calling those specific services in JSON. So it is everything, it is contained in this HTML page. So now you can put a wrapper on that and you can install it on a device. And for that, you have things like Cordova. So let me show you how can I take this application and package in a wrapper so I can install in a device. So Cordova is a command line tool. So you can go in here. Let me go to, I think I have an empty folder in here. So this is an empty folder. So with Cordova, what I can do, and let me just fire it up so you can see it, Cordova. So you can create an app. You can say Cordova, create Books Alive, Cordova. There you go. So now I can get into this application, and I can see what platforms can I add here. So you see that I have Android, BlackBerry, Firefox OS, Windows Phone, Windows 8. Those are the available platforms in Cordova to target, to put a wrapper on top of that, right? Those are the ones that I have in this laptop. So for example, what I can do is adding Android. So this will create a subfolder with the structure for Android. I can add Windows Phone. And then once I have those two, I can just execute Cordova build, and it will build the projects that I can then deploy to the device. Instead of that, I want to show you what is happening in under the hood, right? So let me go here to the directory that just created, platforms. So there should be a directory, yeah, Windows Phone 8. And this directory, you see that this is right here. Hello Cordova.csproc, right? So under the hood, what Cordova is doing is really to create a wrapper that then it can compile, right? So I can even open this project. So I can open this project with Visual Studio, and I can see how Cordova is working. Which it's really doing is creating a wrapper in SAML. So this is main page.saml. And then this main page is creating a control, a custom control, Cordova view. I can go to the definition of this control. And can you see what it's doing? So it's just a web browser. So it's including a control, a native web browser control in my app. And now it's loading my page into that. So it will work like an app. It will behave like an app. Not only that, with Cordova, what you can do also is to connect or to use native APIs in every device, right? And you do that because Cordova is exposing with JavaScript the API of the device, right? A common denominator for the API in a unified JavaScript API that you can use on any device. Right? And then if you want to go further, you can even create your own plugins for doing that. So let me show you the app that I have. So I did exactly this thing. I copied my application to this empty project. I can do the same with Android, iOS, whatever I want. So I can just copy and build the application. And once I have that, I can deploy to any device, right? So in this case, let me show you this application in one device. If I find this, okay. There you go. So in this case, I took this project, I compiled it, and I deployed it to Windows Phone. Right? This same project, compile and deploy. So it looks like an app. If you go to the start screen, so you see that there's an icon in here, typical icon. I mean, it doesn't have any difference with an app. You can click on it, splash screen. Now it will call using JavaScript the services. It will eventually come back. Come on. So I have the list of books. I can click on a book. So similar experience to my web application, the SPA web application that I created, by now working on something that looks like a native app. Right? So far, so good. So this is the closest that we can look to a native app if I'm creating web applications, right? And it is close, right? So still, now we're going to do something very different. Now we're going to start from the other side. Now we are going to go to native applications, and we're going to see how we can evolve those so we don't need to rewrite the application again and again for every device. Let me start with that. So what is the natural approach that you would take if you are creating, What is the natural approach that you would take if you are creating a native app per device? The natural approach would be to use the tools that every vendor is providing, that every platform vendor is providing, right? So for example, iOS, I would use Xcode. Android, I would use Android Developer Tools. Windows, I would use Visual Studio, right? Where are you if you do that? From what grail are you drinking if you do that? From the wrong one, right? So you have to learn 3 different tools. You have to learn 3 different languages. You have to learn 3 different frameworks, and everything for creating 3 different apps, right? Miserable. Is really, really challenging to do that. Think about how to maintain that in the future, how to make sure that they keep the pace, right, to the innovation that you need to do in that. So the good news is that if you are a .NET developer, we have the Holy Grail, right? And the Holy Grail is actually C# and .NET. You can have C# targeting Windows, of course. That is no news, right? And even better with all the announcements this week. You can do universal Windows apps. You can do .NET native, so you can natively compile for Windows Store applications, right? So all good. The key difference in here is that in November, you probably saw that we announced a partnership, a strategic partnership with Xamarin, right? And that partnership goes in 2 directions. So the first one, it is a business partnership, and it's all about making sure that you guys have easier access to Xamarin. The second thing is a technical partnership. So we are collaborating with them to make sure that, 1, we have integration between .NET in Windows and .NET in other devices, and 2, that VS, Visual Studio, works great across those 2 environments, right? So what is Xamarin at the end? What you have is the ability to do, is actually 3 things. So the first thing is that with Xamarin, you can compile your app to every device. right? So you can compile your app to iOS, in that case, native code, or you can compile your .NET app to Android, in that case, Java bytecode. So no difference with any app that you create with Xcode or ADT, right? The second thing that it provides is all the projection of the native APIs in every device. So from .NET, you can use every single piece of the most hidden API on iOS or Android, just like you do with .NET on Windows, where you can call everything, right? The third thing that it does is integrating with the experience that you have as a developer in Visual Studio. So you can start Visual Studio, and directly you can create Android, iOS, and Windows projects. So the interesting part is that because of that technical collaboration that we're having too, we have interesting stuff happening between the two. So one of them is that starting in November with this announcement, you can create portable libraries that not only can be shareable across your Windows .NET applications, but also with iOS and Android. So that means that you can create one portable library, and you can put in there all the code that you want to share, and you can share that binary across all your applications. We are doing things like what Miguel said today too, which is how we can extend the Universal Windows apps so it can also target iOS and Android. Right? And of course, you saw Miguel's demo today in the keynote, right? So Roslyn will be a great opportunity to make sure that that integration is going even better. So two things to remember here. So one is you have the ability to dial how much code you want to reuse, and we'll see that in a second. And the second thing is that if you go deeper, you can go as deep as you want, right? So anything that you can do on Java or Objective-C, you can do it with this. Now, if you want to leverage or you want to reuse as much application, as much code as possible, then you should use something like this. Right? In this case, this is MVVM, but in reality, what you should use is anything that will allow you, and this applies also to the TypeScript single-page application that we saw before, right? So you need a way to separate your client logic from the view. If you do that correctly, then you can put everything, like in this case, this is MVVM. You can put your view model, and you can put your model in the portable library, so you just need to write once. And then you just create a view on top of that for every device. So you are maximizing code reuse, but at the same time, you have the ability to write a view per device. Make sense? Do you want to see this in action? Yeah? OK. OK, so let's start from the beginning. So let me close this. So I have Xamarin installed in this machine, right? And once I do that, the first thing that I will see is that I have here File, New Project. I have new friends in the File, New Project dialog. So I have Android with all the Android apps that I can create. Let me zoom. And I have iOS. And with iOS, I can create iPad, iPhone application, what I want, right? So let me create an Android application so we can see how this works. So I have here, I have to update this, by the way. I have here my Android application. So the funny thing, of course, is that this is .NET code. So everything that you are used to, it is in here. So you want to use templates, here's a template. Do you want to use delegates? Here's a delegate. Do you want to use async? You have async. Do you want to use the VCL? You have the VCL, right? So everything that you are used for .NET applications on Windows, now you have it in the other world. But the other interesting thing here is that that doesn't mean that you are losing the control on what is happening below. So if you go here to the actual layout of your screens, so this is my layout. So that file, AXML, that's the file that Android uses for defining the UI. So you're not using XAML, you're using the actual layout mechanism that you have in Android. And the controls that you will use, if I double click in here, the controls that you have for this designer, these are the native Android controls. So you are not using any wrapper in there. You will use directly the controls that you have in the platform. And that applies to any API. So you can call directly from C# any API that you have in that device. So that is great, right? Because it will allow you to reuse your skills to create any application across any device, but still it's not solving our problem of how we can maximize the code reuse between the different devices, right? So for showing that, let me open a different project, which is my Books Alive application developed with Xamarin and .NET. So in this project, what I've done is to implement MVVM. Right? The trick in here, so first disclaimer, you don't have MVVM in Android or iOS. So you need something. You don't have data binding in Android or iOS. You need something for you to be able to do that data binding directly from the view. And for that, what I'm using is a library called MVVM Cross. Open source, you can use it, right? And it's very handy because it implements MVVM, so data binding, for Android and iOS. Right? So once you do that, what you can do is to create, let me show you something. So you can create a section of your project. In this case, you see the folder portables. So what I put in there is everything that I can share between the different projects. I have my model, which is actually pretty cool. So let me show you something in the model. In the properties in here, so you see that I'm targeting in this, in this portable library, I'm targeting .NET Framework and then Xamarin Android, Xamarin iOS, Windows Store, and Windows Phone. What this allows me is not only to target Windows Phone, Windows Store, Xamarin iOS, and Android. It even allows me to target the .NET Framework. So in this case, I'm taking this model and I'm using it in the server. So the same model across all the layers in my application. That is awesome, right? So you don't have to duplicate even code in the server if you architecture your app that way, right? Once you have that, so the other libraries that I'm including here, so you have another one which is a proxy for calling the services, very convenient, right? Just like I did in TypeScript, so you don't have to deal with different ways of calling services. And then the other important one is the view models. So the view models is where I'm implementing all the logic and where I'm implementing all the bindings that then, all the properties that then I will bind to my views, right? So once I do that, now it's very easy to use it. So now I just need to create a project for Windows Store like this. In the project for Windows Store, you are used to this, so I don't even need to show you this. But for example, if I go to the book detail view, this is same old, no changes in here. So if I go to a property, let me show you. Let me just click in here, that's easier. So page title, and you see that I'm binding with the title, which is a model that I have in a portable library. So far, so good. Now, the cool thing is that I can do the same in Android. So let me go back now to Android. Resources, layout. Let's look, for example, the book details view. So in this one, if I go to the source, so I'm binding the property text of the native Android controlled text view to a property title that is coming from my class in a portable library that I'm sharing across all my different clients, right? And this is implemented with MVVM Cross, right? So that's that extension that you see in there, that's MVVM Cross. So you can separate the logic from the view very easily. So once I do that, and by the way, I have the same thing in iOS. In iOS, it's a little bit trickier because you don't have extensibility. So basically, what you have, let me show you that. You have to do the data binding in code. So in this case, I'm doing the data binding of the same property title with the property of my text view equivalent in iOS. Easy. So let's start to have fun now. I'm going to, where do you want to start? Let's start with the easy one, Windows. So I'm going to start this up. So I have it now in here. So this is my Windows Store app. Let me put a breakpoint so you can see that it's calling the right thing. So let me go here to the navigation service. And when I click the book, it's going to go to navigate to details. Breakpoint in here. I click in a book. I go to the breakpoint. This was not very spectacular, right? Now, it would be spectacular if I can do the same with the Android application, right? So let's put same breakpoint in the same library. Now, I'm going to set the other project in here, Android. Start a project. And then I have an Android device in here that is connected to my laptop. So do you think this is going to work? So I'm going to remote debug my .NET application in an Android device, right? By using portable libraries that are shared across all my devices and then Xamarin to create the Android experience. So I have in here my device, F5. I'm going to switch, which I think is this one. OK. Compiling, taking a while. Still compiling. So remember that in this case, this is creating Java bytecode, right? So no difference with the code that you would create with ADT targeting Android. It's saying here, copying application to device. So it's not deploying the application to device. The application is launching. There you go, looking good. I have my list of books. Now I'm going to click in a book. There you go. Nothing happened because you know what is going to happen here, right? Because I hit the breakpoint in VS, right? Isn't it cool? So no difference. If you are developing a Windows app, it's exactly the same, right? So if you are used to that, you can see the item, you can hover the mouse, you can see the properties. Beyond the Light, that's the book that I just clicked, right? So awesome experience to reuse your code and create native applications for devices like Android and iOS. Now, you are all wondering, there was an iOS project in there. Is that going to work too? Of course. So let me just do this one, the startup project. Now, for iOS, the thing is a little bit more complicated, right? Because for compiling a native iOS app, you need to do it on a Mac, right? So lucky for us, Xamarin has something called an agent. So you just need to install an agent in a Mac. It could be a physical Mac. It could be a Mac somewhere, right? So it doesn't have to be by your computer. You just need connectivity, internet connectivity between the two. Once you do that, what VS is going to do in the background is that when you compile, it is remote compiling in that Mac, right? And when you debug, you can even remote debug in that Mac. So how is it working? So let me show you what I have in here. So now what I have in here is a Mac. I have in here an iPad. I'm going to put the iPad in here. Let me switch. So the iPad is connected to the Mac, right? And I set up VS so it is paired with this Mac, right? So there's a configuration in Xamarin that you basically tell him, hey, this is the Mac, the IP address of the Mac, where I'm going to do this remote compilation. So once I do that, I can compile in here, and I can remote debug in that. I'm remote debugging my iOS, my iPad, right? So if I go again, Beyond the Light, switch to my VS, breakpoint. It's working. So exactly same experience. I can see the values, whatever I want to do, beyond the light, so everything, same experience, same environment, all the tools that you love, everything that you have in one environment to create applications across multiple devices. Cool? So let me finish, let me wrap up. So what we saw in this session, and this is like a small map that I wanted to show you, because at the end, what we saw is all the options that you have for creating applications across devices by using, firstly, we started with JavaScript, right? So all the options that you have with JavaScript, HTML to create applications that are targeting any device. Then you can use, if you go to the other extreme, by the way, we haven't seen that today, but it's totally feasible. You can use C++ to create applications across any device too, right? And in the middle, you have .NET with things like .NET Native that is moving to the left, right? So you have performance, and things like .NET and Xamarin that is moving to the right and is getting you the reach that you need to reach any device, right? So all of that with VS as the common tool for you to use and target any device. So just a quick reminder, this was one of the few sessions that we had today about .NET. You have Jay already, but there's still one. So if you want to go deeper in Xamarin, right after this session, I think it is in Hall 1B or Hall 1A. I think it's Hall 1B. You have Miguel Di Casa with a 1-hour end-to-end session about Xamarin. You have also Habib after that one to show you .NET for Windows. That's all. Thank you very much. Please fill the evaluation forms. Really important for us. Thank you.